Hi friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is your first time here. My name is Jacqueline, and for today's video I'm going to be doing my most anticipated book releases for 2021. I'm very excited to be doing this today. If you don't know, I'm actually trying to post every other day until the end of 2020. So today's video is that, and Wednesday's video is going to be what books I want to read in 2021, specifically older releases that have already come out. So these are going to reflect on the newer releases in 2021. I'm very excited. I have 36 books to be mentioning today. I'm going to kind of go through the year itself, so starting January and ending in November. That's the oldest release I have to mention. And once we kind of go towards like the fall releases, they do get more sporadic. But if you guys like this video concept enough, I would love to do maybe a mid-year one where I really reflect on like the end of the year and kind of see what books maybe I didn't talk about in this video because they weren't given release dates or covers yet. So let's get into it. I am so excited. For reference, if you're new to my channel, I read a lot of YA, new adult, and adult, specifically romance, fantasy, contemporary, any of those kind of genres. I do like to try out different ones, but a lot of these books fall under those kind of categories. So if you don't like books in any of those genres, you might not like some of the books I'm mentioning. Starting off with January, the first book I have comes out on January 12th, and that is Into the Heartless Wood from Joanna, Ruth, Meyer. So yes, I do have a physical copy of this one, an ARC copy of this one, but this is still one of my most anticipated book releases. I'm not going to be able to read it this year. I already have some other books, if you haven't watched my last video, that I want to read before the end of 2020. So this is definitely going to be one of those books I do read in 2021, and I'm definitely anticipating it. This is a YA fantasy retelling. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. In this, we follow the idea of a monstrous siren tree. So there is the Heartless Wood, in which a witch has 8 siren tree daughters, and these siren trees actually lure men and women into the woods to harvest their souls in order to keep flourishing. So there is a human village nearby, and we have a man that ends up venturing into the woods and meets our main character, who yet again is one of these siren trees, and that's when the story takes off. The next book I have is Cast in the Firelight, and this is from Dana Swift. This is the first book, a part of a new fantasy duology that comes out on January 19th, 2021. I have to stop saying 2021. Oh my god. Anyway, this is really exciting for me. I got approved of this through NetGalley, and I'm just really excited because we have 2 royal heirs that are betrothed to be married, and they end up actually meeting one another and having like false disguises so they don't know it's one another, and then they see they have this enemy. So how are they supposed to be betrothed when this enemy is going to like ruin their 2 kingdoms coming together to form one big kingdom? Look, I'm here for it. I love myself some royalty aspect in a book. I love the whole, you know, arranged marriage idea. I love this whole kind of working together to defeat a common enemy, and I love the idea of our 2 characters hiding their secret or identity from one another. That is so fun. It already seems like it's going to be a really fun first book, and I'm curious to see how it's going to turn out. So I will definitely be reading and reviewing this in January. Next book I have is called Wings of Ebony from Elle. This is actually the author's debut novel, which I love supporting debut authors. It's so important in my opinion too, and I love actually actively searching for debut author releases over anything else. So I cannot wait to pick this up. Oh my gosh. I also have a NetGalley arc of this, and I need to read it like ASAP. We have our main female character, Rue, who unfortunately her mother passes in front of her eyes, and her sister end up getting taken from her father that they never met in their entire life and being whisked off to the island for magic wielders. She ends up realizing she's half human and half godlike. So I'm just so excited. I'm excited to meet our main character, Rue. I'm excited to see this whole half human, half god like dynamic, and also this island of magic wielders. I wonder what other kind of things we have going on in that dynamic. So I can't remember if I said the release date for Wings of Ebony, but that comes out on January 26th. And another debut release we have coming out on January 26th is called The X Talk. This is the author's romantic comedy debut. It is from Rachel Lynn Solomon. This is a romance contemporary, adult romance contemporary, in which we follow 2 characters and they end up coming together to do a talk show. I'm pretty positive one is the producer and one is the host, and then it ends up kind of happening by accident. But I'm here for this entire thing. You are literally giving me already from the synopsis that this is going to be like an enemies to lover with banter. and a ton of humor. Moving on to February, we now have a YA horror, and this is What Big Teeth, and let me just say, this cover immediately caught my eye. There is something so different about this and so just like startling in a good way. It already has you intrigued from the moment you see this cover what this story is about. So we follow our main female protagonist, Eleanor, who has not spoken or talked to her family since being sent away to a boarding school. Eventually, she actually decides to confront said family and goes and travels to Maine in order to do so. And once she gets there, she realizes things are not right. I'm very curious to see what this will entail. It sounds like a lot of fun. I do love a good horror, kind of thriller, fantasy, paranormal element, and I feel like that's exactly what this will give me. So if you are also excited for this, it comes out on February 2nd. Next, I have 4 books that are being released on February 9th. So the first is a YA contemporary, and that is As Far As You'll Take Me from Bill Stamper. This is a coming of age story. We follow our main character as he's actually traveling internationally, and he's trying to figure out himself as well as his sexuality in which to kind of open up to other people, especially his friends and his family. So I'm very excited for this. I know Pride is featured in this. I know there's a lot of music dynamic in here. I just have been reading such positive reviews and such that I cannot wait to read this myself. The next book I have that comes out on February 9th is called The Gilded Ones, and this is from Nima Forma, and this is the first book a part of a YA fantasy novel. I'm very excited for this one just because it sounds really different as well. We follow our main female character who lives in this village in which once you turn 16 you have to go through a blood ceremony. In order to become a member of the village, your blood has to run red. So when our main female character does the blood ceremony, her blood runs gold, which means that she cannot be accepted into our village. But apparently a mysterious woman comes and tells her she's actually an immortal with these gifts, and she is a part of a group that will really help the Empire with their greatest threat. So she kind of joins and finds like another found family in that dynamic. I'm curious to see what these abilities are, and I haven't really heard of any sort of concept like this, so this was definitely one that caught my attention. The next one I have is Ladies' Formula for Love, and this is a historical fiction romance that is coming out on February 9th. And this caught my attention because a lot of people blurbed it as being like Pride and Prejudice meets The Bodyguard, and had this element of our main character who starts this sanctuary for scientists, and she's falling for a guard but she can't be with him, and that whole dynamic. And then the final February 9th release is one that I am anticipating, but also it had me kind of like shook and almost like reevaluate a lot of things in my life. The book I'm referring to is called The Iron Raven, which is a part of a spin-off series of the Iron Face series from Julie Kagawa. If you don't know, the Iron Face series from Julie Kagawa, I have some of the books in my rainbow shelf, is one of my all-time favorite series. I remember falling in love with that series when I was in middle school and just obsessed. It's actually a Midnight Summer's Tale from William Shakespeare loose retelling, and a character in Midnight Summer's Dream is Puck, and he is the fairy. I think I just said the wrong thing the first time. Whatever. Midnight Summer's Dream. So Puck is in Midnight Summer's Dream, William Shakespeare's version, and I absolutely love Puck in the Iron Fae version, and now this is the Puck spin-off series, and I was like, wait, the hell? Because I had read up to the 4th book, a part of the original Iron Face series. I know they came off with a spin-off series with the brother of the main female character and other stuff like that. I'm not going to spoil it for anyone. I had been recently reminded of it, but now this is reminding me even more. I want to reread the first series, go on to the second spin-off series, and go on to this one, because Julie Kagawa has such a way with her characters, and fantasy especially. She can write her ass off with fantasy. Next book I have is a female-to-female romance, and I am just so excited for this one because it has a really common trope, but the fact it's a female-to-female romance is phenomenal. So this is called Honey Girl. It is from Morgan Rogers. It is her debut novel. It is a adult romance contemporary, and in this book we follow our main character who has her shit together. She has her PhD in astronomy. She's 28 years old, straight A's all her life, never been bad. She ends up going to Vegas, getting drunk, and gets married to a woman, and then things go all sorts of ways. And I am just so excited for this because I have read a ton of, you know, getting drunk, getting married trope, or specifically going to Vegas, getting drunk, and getting married trope but I have not really read any when it involves a female to female romance, so this is a beautiful idea in itself, but also the cover is gorgeous, the concept I'm here for, and I'm just really excited to fall in love with their love. And then the last February release I have to mention is actually another February 23rd release, and that is called A Dark and Hollow Star, and this is from Ashley Shuttleworth. It's the first book, a part of a new fantasy YA series, and basically we're following half fae, half human creatures. It's set in Toronto, I'm pretty positive, and I'm just here for it. Like, look at this cover. I think I stared at this cover for 30 minutes and I was like, what? Apparently they're trying to all stop a serial killer that is on the prowl in Toronto, and I'm just here for it. We have a vast array of characters. It seems like it's a little bit of like a found family dynamic with these groups of characters. Moving on to March, I have 6, I believe, book releases to be mentioning. The first one I'm just going to briefly mention, and that is Chain of Iron from Cassandra Clare. The second book, a part of the Chain of Gold series from Cassandra Clare, which is the spin-off series to the Infernal Devices series. So I'm just going to be mentioning it's coming out on March 2nd. I think you know, I know, we all know. Let's move forward. The next book I have is another March 2nd release, which is actually the author's debut novel. She is an Indigenous author, and I feel like especially because it's coming out on March 2nd, which, like I said, we have a very popular author's book release that is coming out on that day. I really wanted to highlight this because it sounds phenomenal. So this is more of a YA mystery thriller. It's called Firekeeper's Daughter from Angeline Boulley, and like I said, she is Indigenous, and our character is biracial with that. So we follow our main character, who's 18. She feels very lost in herself when it comes to our identity because she is biracial, so she feels like she doesn't really fit into the two worlds in which she happens to encounter, and she ends up, I believe, meeting someone and feeling like she finally has a friend, and then murders end up happening. Next, I have 3 March 9th releases to mention, and the first is called Can't Take That Away. This is from Stephen Salvatore. It is actually their debut novel, and in this book we are following 2 characters, I believe it is duo POV. One character specifically in here is genderqueer, and they actually end up getting the lead female role in the play, and unfortunately they end up dealing with a lot of discrimination and hate from the rest of the school for that, but they end up having to really just come to terms with themselves and their identity. They've always wanted to be like the next Mariah Carey, so I'm just very excited to see exactly how everything comes about with this story. Specifically, one of my favorite things that I love is every chapter header starts with the pronouns, and that's how you know when the chapters themselves have changed perspective. So as you can see, this says she, her, hers, and this says they, them, their. The next March 9th release I have is called Bitter and Sweet Magic, and this is from Adrienne Tooley. It is actually the author's debut fantasy novel, and we are following 2 different characters. So our first character is a witch that has been cursed to never love, and we have another character that is struggling with their father. Specifically, their father is dying, so in order to kind of save him, she ends up having a bargain with the witch to give her love that she has from her father to the witch. So basically the witch can feed or get love from other people, but she can't have or feel the love herself, if that makes sense. So I'm very curious to see even how that magic system in itself works, and how obviously everything else is going to work, the bargain, all that sorts. I have a feeling these 2 are definitely going to be falling in love, which I'm here for, so I'm just very curious with this one. I did get it actually approved on NetGalley, so I will definitely be reading it sooner rather than later. And then the final book I have is the 3rd and final book, a part of the Brown Sisters series from Talia, Hibbert, and that is called Actor Age Eve Brown. I have the first 2 books right here because I just talked about them in Sunday's video of books I want to finish before the end of 2020. If I don't get to them by 2020, it's going to be the first books I think I start in 2021, and I'm definitely going to be reading this alongside it, and I'm going to be binging all of them, doing reading vlog, and doing a review on all. I think I'll probably like separate it by timestamps and do almost non-spoiler reviews. Anyway, this is what I have in my head. Next, I have Namesake, which comes out on March 16th. It is the sequel to Fable, which I believe she's right here. Ha ha ha. This isn't the original cover, it's the reverse dust jacket edition I have, but I really enjoyed Fable. I believe I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars, and this is a YA pirate series. So this is the sequel. It's the last book, a part of this duology. I do actually have this approved on NetGalley, so I'm going to be doing a duology review for this series definitely when I get on to the sequel. If you're looking forward or want to start a new kind of pirate duology, it is going to be wrapped up on March 16th. The next book I have is Lost in the Neverwoods, and this is from Aiden Thomas. It comes out on March 16th, and this is more of a fantasy YA retelling because it's actually a Peter Pan retelling, which you guys know I eat up. But specifically, Aiden Thomas actually wrote Cemetery Boys, which came out this year. It was his debut novel, and that book I really need to read because I've heard unbelievable things about. But specifically when I heard this summary, I was like, I need this in my life. Like I said, I love Peter Pan retellings. In this story, we follow Wendy as she 5 years ago had been kind of lost and went into the woods with her brothers, and only she came out. So it was a very haunting experience for her. It seems like she wants to kind of avoid it and run away from it. But what ends up happening is there's a boy in the middle of the road who is Peter, and Peter says, if you want to help make sure other boys don't have the same fate as your brothers, you need to come with me. So she ends up going back into the woods, and that's where our story takes place. So I'm very excited. Like, yet again, I love a good Peter Pan retelling, and there's just something about it that never gets old. I don't know what it is. Moving on to April releases, we have two that are coming out on April 20th. Which I cannot wait for both of these. So the first one we have is Witches Steeped in Gold, and this is from Ciannon Smart. It is a YA fantasy novel in which we follow witches, and specifically this book caught my attention. If you don't know Fictional Fates, aka Joel here in the booktube world, I would highly recommend to check him out. I adore him, and specifically he had done a vlog where he had read this book. I've seen his tweets and I saw his Goodreads. I was like, you know what? I need to read this. He made it sound phenomenal, and it truly does sound like a one-of-a-kind story. So I would highly recommend to read this summary for yourself. I'm just going to read a little blurb of the summary, but I feel like the summary itself explains it more. So it says, this Jamaican-inspired fantasy debut is a thrilling journey where dangerous magic reigns supreme and betrayal lurks beneath every word. It's also 544 pages. When I say that's so intimidating, oh my god. Speaking of intimidating, we have the third book, a part of the Blood and Ash series from Jennifer Armentrout, which is The Crown of Gilded Bones. Can I just say something? There was something so satisfying about seeing this cover because the color schemes is a perfect combination of the first book and the second book. Am I wrong? No, it's just so satisfying. Also, when I said that book was intimidating, this book is 625 pages. Y'all know I'm gonna read this in like 4 hours. I'm literally going to stay up all night when I get this finally. It's what happened with the second book. I know it's going to happen with this one. I am eating these up like nobody's business. There is something about this series. I mean, Jennifer Armentrout has always been able to write really good books for me. I've always been able to just jump into her stories and fly through. There is something about this specific series though. It is new adult romance fantasy. I love that genre specifically, but also the characters, the world, the plot. She just got me with this series so good, and I love it. Moving on to May, I have two books to mention. So the first one comes out on May 4th, and that is Blade of Secrets, and this is the first book, a part of the Bladesmith series from Trisha Levenseller. It's going to be her new YA fantasy series, and I'm very excited about this one, specifically for two different reasons. So first, the whole Bladesmith idea, specifically our main character is apparently a super talented bladesmith and ends up getting commissioned from the wrong person, creates the most powerful magical sword in the world, and ends up having to go on a mission to find that person and get the sword back because they're not the right person to have that sword. But we also have our character who deals with social anxiety, which as someone that can really relate to that, I'm very curious to see how Trisha handles that representation. I really do like Trisha Levenseller. Absolutely adore the Daughter of the Pirate King duology. I have a review up on my channel if you're curious. I also have a review actually for her newest book that came out, which is The Shadow Between Us, which I liked. I think I gave it a 4 to 5 stars. I didn't love like her first duology. I'm curious to see where this will fall since I didn't loved the last book I read from her. And then the final May release I have is Honey and Issue's Guide to Fake Dating, which is the author's debut novel, and I'm really excited to be reading it. It just sounds right up my alley. Basically, we follow two characters. Like I said, first we have Honey, who is talking to her friends about how she's bisexual, and they end up invalidating her identity and say, you know, she can't be bisexual if she's only dating guys. So she says, that's not true. I'm dating someone. It's a girl. They're like, who? And she says, Issue, who is literally her enemy. So it's like enemies that are fake dating. Chef's kiss. I'm so here for. Moving on to June releases, I'm going to start with June 1st, and we have A Chorus Rises, which is the second book, a part of A Song Below Water series from Bethany C. Morrow, and this was more of a contemporary written fantasy where we have our characters who are mermaids, but it definitely is more of a contemporary fantasy than a fantasy contemporary because it reads way more contemporary basis. It just happens to be that our characters are mermaids as well. So I really did like this one. I believe I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I think just because I was expecting it to read a little bit more fantasy than contemporary, but I still enjoyed it, and this was her debut novel. So look at the beauty of this book, look at the beauty of this cover. I'm definitely curious. This follows a character that was featured in here, and she was more of like a plot device in this story. I want to see where she's going to kind of take us with this. And then we actually have another sequel coming out on that day, which is A Psalm of Storms and Silence from Rosanna A. Brown, which is the sequel and the last book, a part of the A Song of Wrath and Ruin duology, which I am so excited for. Yet again, I just talked about this in my last video. I want to read this before the end of the year because I've heard such phenomenal things, and I'm anticipating this book so much. One, look at this cover. Look at the combination of the red with the green. It's gonna be beautiful on the shelves. I'm like, oh, crying. I just love it. I have said this before, it's a very immersive fantasy series. It's enemies to lovers. We have a very empowered and empowering female character, and I'm just so excited for it. I believe there's a lot of magical elements in this series as well, but I just love duologies. I'm loving this whole duology thing we have going on recently. And then the final book that is being released on June 1st is The Love Song of Ivy K. Harlowe, and it is from Hannah Moskowitz. We have two characters that are best friends. The one character is in love with the other, Ivy, and Ivy is the kind of girl that doesn't really stay with the same person twice, and her best friend knows that, even though she's been in love with her, and she knows that and accepts that. She ends up seeing, though, Ivy seeing this girl multiple times and ends up getting a girlfriend, and it really breaks her. So what is this main character going to do? And that's where our story takes off. So I'm very curious to see what happens, and I definitely wanted to include it in this list. Next, I have another sapphic read to mention, and that is After Love, and this sounds so good. First of all, the blurb on Goodreads, the first sentence in all caps says, "The lesbian love story you've been dying to read." And when I say this synopsis sounds so good, I'm so excited. So basically, okay. Anyway, we're gonna keep going. Basically, our main character is dead, and she ends up getting into a car accident, and that's the last thing she remembers. She wakes up and she's like, am I alive or dead? And she ends up figuring out she's in the afterlife. She gets an invitation, New Year's only, that she can come on Earth with other Reapers, which happen to be females, and they can go to collect souls. So our main character says, yeah, I'll do that, in order to only see her girlfriend for the last time, who she had been in love with and was dating prior to her death. So I'm just so here for it. I'm like, first of all, the whole Reaper idea, so cool. I'm interested to see how that's going to figure out. Second of all, this whole loving someone even though you're dead and they're alive and you're only going to Earth to see them. My heart, my literal, like, who would do that for me? No one. The next book I have is definitely in my top 5 most anticipated book releases of 2021. It sounds phenomenal. This is called Sisters of the Snake, and it is the first book, a part of the Rhea and Rainy series, which is a YA fantasy retelling. We have, first of all, 2 characters as well as 2 authors, and the authors are twins and our characters are twins. We have a princess and a orphan, and they end up being separated at birth. So they go throughout their lives, and then they come together and they see each other and they're like, you look like me, I look like you. I love the whole separated twin at birth thing. But we also have a magical fantasy element involved as well. So like I said, our one character is a princess and the other is more of an orphan. So they end up switching places. It also says Sisters of the Snake is an action-packed immersive fantasy that will thrill fans of the Crown's Game and Tiger at Midnight, deadly magic, hidden temples, and dark prophecies. So the Sisters of the Snake comes out on June 15th, and another June 15th release I can't wait to read is Bloodlike Magic. This is the author's debut novel. It is an urban fantasy one at that. She has to sacrifice the person she loves in order to save her family's magic. But the problem is she's never loved anyone, so she has to go out, fall in love, and then kill that person in order to save her family. Like, why has no one come up with a concept like this? Because when I tell you, I read the summary and I was like, that sounds like immediately something I would devour in seconds. I'm excited to meet our main character, interested to see why exactly she has to sacrifice her love in order to save her family's magic, and I'm also interested to see who she's going to sacrifice, or maybe not. The final book I have is Darling, and this is from K. Akram. It is actually a Peter Pan retelling. It's a YA fantasy that comes out on June 22nd. I think I'm so excited for this just because I love a good Peter Pan retelling, but this sounds so different for it being one. So I just want to say quickly what actually K. Akram said there would not be and what there would be in here. Darling will not include unchallenged romanticization of Peter with no consequences for his behavior. Love to see it. 2, anti-indigenous racism. You know what I'm talking about. Yes, we do, and thank God we're not seeing it here. 3, girls competing for Peter's romantic attention. We are done with that, ladies. Yes, we are. But what it will include, a bi Tinkerbell. We have Nick and Nora's Infinite Police procedural, which I have actually watched Nick and Nora way too many times. I know exactly what she's talking about. Then we have crime, drag queens, in Chicago's public transits. We also meet the Lost Boys. We meet Tinkerbell Underground. The enemy is Detective Hook. So I'm just really curious overall. Can Wendy find the courage to survive the night and make sure everyone else does too? Next, I have my July releases, and I only have one book to mention for this month, and that is These Hollow Vows from Lexi Ryan. I had actually previously read Lexi Ryan's one trilogy that involves her main character forgetting her memory. I cannot remember what that's called. But this specifically is a YA, it seems almost more new adult fantasy romance. And in this we follow our main character who hates Fae, doesn't want anything to do with them, but somehow is now caught in between two different Fae kingdoms because the Fae princes want her. I literally can't relate! Caught between two treacherous fake courts and their dangerously seductive princes. So this just sounds like something I could eat up in like hours. Next we have August releases, and I only have one book to mention so far for this month, but this one sounds so good. It is called A Dragon Bird in the Fern. This is basically a YA fantasy yet again. We follow our main character who has to marry her sister's betrothed because her sister was murdered and she wants to find out who killed her sister. Also, our main character is dyslexic, so she has to struggle with that as well in this new kingdom, but she has to marry this man in order to create an alliance between the countries. So I'm just here for this entire thing, and I do know there's a little bit more high fantasy elements when it comes to it because I believe the ghosts of the souls that have been unrested are roaming still, so I believe her sister's ghost is still roaming, and that's a whole element as well. Last but not least, we have the month of November, so I have 2 books to talk about. Unfortunately, I didn't really see any books that I was interested in that happened to come out in September and October. When I look for it, I like deep dive, and I'm more specifically looking for books that are coming out that I'm interested in rather than being like, what books are coming out in this month? So I'll collect all books that I'm interested in, put them in chronological order, and it just happened to be that no books were coming out in September and October that I was personally interested in right now. But that can always change because I am constantly like stalking Goodreads, nobody's business. The first one that is coming out in November, it's coming out on November 2nd. Neither of these have book covers released, by the way. Sounds unbelievable, like literally unbelievable. It says it has this dynamic of being compared to the setting of Avatar: The Last Airbender, which if you guys don't know, Avatar: The Last Airbender is one of my all-time favorite shows. I have a water tribe symbol tattooed on me, and it is one of those shows that I can watch no matter what and I know exactly what's going on. It's just home almost. This specific story sounds so good. So apparently in order to save her grandmother from a group of dangerous priests, our main character, who has the ability to steal souls, has to make an alliance with a ex-prince in order to save her. First of all, why is the prince an ex? Second of all, the whole stealing soul. Second of all, dangerous priests. I need this in my life. And then last but not least, short and sweet, we have the second book part of the Crescent City series by Vicerj Mass, which is apparently coming out November 2nd as well, 2021. Who knows? I don't know when it's coming out, but I really did love the first one, so I'm definitely anticipating this one. I know I didn't actually talk about, I'm going to say it just right now, I know I didn't talk about the Cord and Thorns and Roses, whatever that one's called. I don't know if I actually will be picking that up. I don't really have any desire to, which is so weird because I think at a time I was so excited for it, and now I feel like my perspective and change has shifted completely. Don't really feel any desire to have to read the spinoff. Maybe if I see reviews, it might push me to. So those were all of my most anticipated book releases for 2021. Oh my goodness. First of all, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Second of all, I hope you guys found books that you are now anticipating as well. And third, let me know what books you are anticipating. Let me know if you had any of these on your list. I am so excited for the new year. I'm so excited for all these books now, and especially ones that I already have. I'm like, shit, I want to read it right now, but I can't. I'm holding myself back. But let me know just what your thoughts are. I want to yet again just thank you guys so much for staying in this video. I know was probably a long one. I already am going to be kind of loving myself in the future, I can tell, but this was definitely worth it and has me even more excited for the next year. I will see you guys in my next video though, which will be what books I want to read in 2021, so definitely stay subscribed for that. Bye!